One of the most common requests I see people make to Bethesda is for them to remake the classic Fallouts, a turn-based RPG, into the more commercially successful 3D style. And I agree, it'd be cool to see. But I also began to think about the complications. Could it actually work? First complication, the scale. So, it's no secret the original Fallouts have a very small world space connected by an overworld map. From a gameplay perspective, the playable areas are very small. From a lore perspective though, well, I found this thread on the Fallout 4 subreddit. This thread shows some of the game maps compared to the real United States landmass. It's not a perfect comparison by any means, but I felt it was fairly accurate. Although the maker of this mislabeled wanted to, come on man, Fallout 2 is literally right there, how did you make this mistake? At any rate, you can see Fallout 3, New Vegas, and 4 here. Then you can see just how much territory Fallout 1 and 2 cover. The closest is Fallout 76. Of course, nothing really compares to the behemoth that is Fallout Tactics. If you were to remake Fallout 1 in 3D, you would honestly need to make a map that's twice the size of 76 just to get a reasonable feel of the scale. Of course, at that point there would be a lot of emptiness. After all, the original games take place in some pretty small world spaces. So, you'd have to throw in a lot of Bethesda creative stuff to fill in the gaps, original and unique locations and quests. One option would be going a Mass Effect route, and just having a world map with 3D spaces to play in. But, as much as I love Mass Effect, I don't think this will work well for a Bethesda game. Part of the reason why so many play Bethesda game is for the exploration. It also makes the new games feel small, really small, especially compared to 3 New Vegas 4 and 76. Second complication, the car. So, in Fallout 2 you can get a car, the Highwayman. It works for the 2D games because all it does is make your party move faster in the world map accompanied by this track. And it does have a couple of unique interactions later, but overall it's very much the same game. The more modern titles, they need to change up the way they design games. It's very much intended for walking around. We need long stretches of flat, debris-free, uncluttered areas to drive to and from locations. One benefit of this, though, is that it could have a lot less stuff in the desert, decreasing development time. And as I said, people like to explore in Bethesda games, and there's less things to explore, there's less interest in playing. Besides, you know what's faster than a car? Fast travel. This would really make the point of a car redundant, at least when you're not in survival mode. Also, and this is another thing, power armor. It would be very awkward. Like imagine trying to climb into a car wearing a big suit of armor. I don't know, I just don't see it working very well. Third complication, super mutants. This is more of a design complication than a technical one. But under current design elements of the super mutants, they're a very common spawn and honestly pretty easy to deal with. Like no joke, in Fallout 3, fresh from Vault 101, with nothing more than a vault suit and a 10mm, you can kill a super mutant as opposed to super soldier with ease. You can kill a couple of them actually. There's a similar situation with Fallout 4, but they're a little harder. They'd have to change that up. No level scaling with super mutants, high damage resistance, and top tier weapons. You need to scream and cry when you come across them and all you're carrying is nothing but a hunting rifle and some leather armor. They need to be designed with the idea of, okay, I want super mutants so powerful that the player needs combat armor and upper mid-tier weapons to have a reasonable chance of walking away as the victor. Their sheer power should also be a roadblock for the Mariposa and Cathedral, and this should punish underpowered players for exploring a little too much. Speaking of exploring too much, fourth complication, the time limit in Fallout 1. This intimidates a lot of new players in the original. It may have to be removed. I personally like the sense of urgency, but most don't. Most really just like to explore, wander around, look for stuff, and take their time. Like, yo, my vault is dying of thirst and stuff, but man do I really want to spend time helping this guy kill a bunch of raiders that took over his home. Actually, to be fair, he gives you a 223 pistol, or at least I guess that's how I pronounce it, that gun. So, you know, help him. But I don't think there would be an issue removing the time limit. After all, in Fallout 2, your village is dying due to a drought, but there's not really much of a time limit. I mean, there is one, but it's 13 years and it's really hard to hit, so it practically doesn't exist. Fifth complication, new voices. You know what's great in the original games? The voice acting.
Oh, this is excellent.
There's very little of it, but what does exist is absolutely top-notch. And it features well-known voice actors like Tony Jay, the voice of the Lieutenant, and Cree Summers, voice of Tandy. I'd imagine that they'd have to hire a lot of really high-profile talent to match up to the quality of these original stellar performances. But they'd have to re-record the old performances to keep the audio quality in sync anyways. There also may be legal issues using the old clips as well, but I'm not really sure. Not a lawyer. I can also imagine that some of these voice actors are a lot more expensive these days, and in the case of someone like Tony J, who has long left this world, they would need to be replaced. And it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to find somebody capable of delivering the same performances he gave. Now, the voice acting has certainly improved in Fallout 4.
Sturgis, tell him.
And Fallout makes a lot of money, so there's probably going to be a much higher budget for good voice work. But it is important to note, 6 Complication, they just have their own ideas. Why remake an old game when you could just make a new one, right? And honestly, Todd Howard basically said so himself. In an interview with The Guardian, Todsworth said the following: "I'm happy you can play Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind now on Xbox One as it's backwards compatible. I'm really happy that Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, and others are making it easier to play older games as they were played at the time. I actually prefer that over remasters. I'd rather you play Morrowind the way it was. I think the age is part of its identity. For Skyrim Remastered, we had done some of the work on it, but it was already pretty visually close. But for something like Morrowind, my personal preference is not to remaster it. We also get asked a lot to remaster 1997's Fallout 1. And I usually say, if you have a PC, you can play Fallout the way it was. I think that's how it should be. And it seems pretty likely that if Toddleton isn't into the idea, it's not going to happen. And while this was on the subject of remasters rather than remakes, it still showed that they rather let the game stay the way it was. Of course, that was a few years ago. Times can change. Bonus Complication. I hate to say it, but classic fans are going to hate it no matter what. I mean, that's just it. I don't think that should stop them from trying to do it if they wanted to, though. Now, why could it happen? So there's a few reasons why it could happen. Note, I'm not saying that there's any hints or leaks or whatever, there's not. But there's a few reasons for the possibility. Number 1, the recent purchase by Microsoft means there's a change in management. Todd the Todd is still Bethesda's director, but he now answers to Microsoft rather than ZeniMax. So, there could be a change in ventures. Number 2, since now Microsoft owns Bethesda, they now have a few sister companies to work with, including Obsidian, who does have experience working with Gamebryo, Creation Engine Stati, and there's still some talent left there from the New Vegas days, like Josh Sawyer. If Microsoft wanted to, they could have Obsidian work on the hypothetical remake while Bethesda works on their main titles. And number 3, there have been a lot of remakes for classic games lately. My personal favorite being Destroy All Humans. Love it. Industry trends do happen, and well, Bethesda has been guilty of following them too, to varying degrees of success. I don't think a 3D Fallout is likely to happen. Ever, really. There's been a few modded attempts, but ambitious Fallout projects like this either fall flat or they're just not very good. And they take forever to make anyways. Could it work? On a technical level, yes. It'd just be a lot of work. But I don't think they're very interested in making one.